Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We're on episode 148, and it's been a long time coming because we ran into a couple technical issues last week, and likewise kind of started off the same way, Justin, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I've been super excited for this episode, though.
certainly. So let's cut right to the chase. We're both super excited for this episode. We've done an interview with Shannon Knorr in the past, who is our special guest today. Episodes 25 and 26, we had to look it up. And with Shannon, we kind of did like a two-part series with her. Did an episode one week and then an episode the next week because her story and her background was very, very lengthy. So I'll give just a brief introduction for those of you that haven't listened to those episodes. First and foremost, I highly recommend just going back and listening to those now before you even try to digest this episode, because in speaking with Shannon over the past 2 weeks, there's going to be a lot of kind of like prerequisite knowledge that I think people need to have. So going and listening to those previous episodes would be really beneficial. But just to give a brief background on her, which I'm sure I'm going to do it a disservice because she's so many different things. She's a mother, she's a nurse, small business owner, professional athlete, a multitude of different hats that she wears. So we'll let her give kind of a brief introduction as well. So welcome to the show again for the third time, Shannon.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be back.
All right, so give us a brief rundown of who you are, anything that I left out or didn't mention.
No, I'm a nurse. I'm an athlete. I'm a mom, a single mom of two pretty amazing little girls. I bake on the side. I just absolutely love cooking and baking. It's just a hobby of mine. I guess the only other thing that you left out, which I guess pertains, you would hear it in the other episodes in my past, is the fact that I have dealt with eating disorders for the most of my life, on and off struggles. But that's kind of what we're going to delve into a little bit here today.
Yeah. So Shannon, you reached out to us, and one of the things that Justin, you and I are really big on is mental health. And Justin and I talk about that all the time, in several different capacities, is the importance of having quality mental health, not only like the recognition of, because I feel like a lot of problems, like the first step is identification, like knowing that it's out there, and mental health awareness. But then ultimately the mental health awareness isn't enough. There needs to be like a proactive approach to like fixing it and solving it. So talking about it being the first step and then trying to mitigate it being the second. Justin, you and I are pretty adamant about mental health, and I know that that's something that you originally brought to the podcast. So you want to give like kind of a little bit of your 2 cents on mental health and why it's so important to you, Justin?
Absolutely. So, like, the older I get, and not that I'm old, I hope everybody thinks I'm old, but the older I get, the more I think about it is I feel like we all suffer from some form of mental health or not issue or of one sort or another, and sorry, my voice, but I feel like the more we talk about it, the more we can normalize people coming forward and admitting they have a problem. And, that was the biggest step for me when I lost all my weight in the beginning is, I knew I had a problem, but I wouldn't admit it to the world. I wouldn't be, what's the word I'm looking for? I wouldn't be transparent. I wouldn't talk about my issue because I was ashamed of it or I was afraid of it. There's not a problem. It's not a problem to be ashamed of. It's a problem to be ashamed of it that you should, not that you should be ashamed of it, but you shouldn't. Everybody should feel the ability to say, I'm an alcoholic and I need help, or I have an eating disorder, I need help, or I feel like I hate myself and I need help. Because the more people can talk about it, the better they can be. The better off they can be, the healthier they can be mentally and physically and spiritually. So that's kind of the way I feel about it anymore. And I've kind of taken a stance over the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years, that at any given moment, if somebody needs to talk, all they have to do is pick up the phone or send me a message. I will stop what I'm doing and talk to anybody at any point in time. I'm always up. Even if I'm asleep, I can be up because I'm there for you, everybody. Mm-hmm. So That's my 2 cents on the mental health thing. I could talk about it for days and hours because it's that important. And I think the original 2 interviews with Shannon was a huge turning point for me to realize because at that point before we interviewed you, Shannon, I didn't even realize how much um, what my issue was mental health.
Yeah.
I just thought, a light switch, because that's what I always tell people. I just flipped the switch and started doing the thing, but I didn't realize that it was a problem. And your story really helped me recognize another layer of my story. So, I always give you credit for that because, I didn't even realize that it was a problem until I knew it was a problem.
And I
Yeah.
think that in today's world, we've gotten to the point where I think we are a lot more widely accepting of those mental health issues because there is so much awareness and there is so much discussion taking place. And one of the things that Shannon mentioned to me, in particular, to eating disorders, which is certainly a really, really big subgroup on the mental health side of things, was the lack of resources. And it's not just for eating disorders; it's for all types of mental issues where we're being transparent, like Justin said, and we're all open about these sorts of things now. Not all of us, but it's continuing to trend that way where people are talking about it a little bit more readily, especially because like me being someone who's immersed in the sports world, I see a lot of athletes coming forward and talking about their struggles. Like Kevin Love was one to come to mind that played in the NBA or plays in the NBA. And I know that I'm sure we're all at least somewhat familiar with Simone Biles talking about her issues at the Olympics. So I think that the recognition is there, and the unfortunate part now is we still have a lot of more hill to climb. We've started the journey, but we have a lot more of the mountain to scale, so to speak, because we need to find ways to put resources out there for people. So one of the things that Shannon and I had a conversation about off air was her kind of relapse into some of the eating disorder issues that she had suffered from previously. So Shannon, would you mind taking the floor and first and foremost, just briefly going over, because I know it's lengthy, but briefly go over your past history with eating disorders and then your recent struggles as well to kind of shed some light on it. And then would you also please share some statistics on those sorts of things, because some of the numbers that you gave me were really eye-opening for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So history wise, when I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with anorexia and bulimia. I was in the hospital, an inpatient hospitalization for about 2 years. I was home very briefly on and off in between, sometimes just a weekend. I don't think I ever made it more than like a few days at home before I was readmitted to inpatient. So pretty much a full 2 years. I started out in New Jersey and then I ended up going out to Oklahoma for treatment. I came home and, I was so the thing with eating disorders and most mental health illnesses is they're a lifelong battle. It's something that you're going to deal with for the rest of your life. So again, eating disorders are no exception to that. It's something I struggled with on and off ever since being diagnosed with it and coming home. So shortly, I was in prep right before COVID for shows in 2020.
So let's touch on that just real briefly. I apologize for interrupting
you're
you, but
fine.
just in case people haven't listened to the previous interviews that we've done with you, you are a professional competitive or a professional physique athlete in women's physique, I believe,
And
correct?
bikini. Yep,
Okay, bikini, that's it. Yep.
Yep.
So you compete professionally on stage, which kind of sets the background because I think that you were pretty vocal about your eating disorder previously and how bodybuilding kind of helps you redirect some of that in an appropriate manner, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question there.
Sure.
And and I think I probably asked it in the first time we recorded, but I know you use it to redirect your energy to a positive, correct? But is it difficult to do? I know that's a loaded question.
I think so initially when I started out and first started like my very first prep and everything, I would say no, it wasn't hard. Really, it was pretty easy for the most part. The deeper I got into prep, the more I stayed in prep, the leaner I got, the harder it was to redirect. But I was still able to do it. It was when I came out of prep. In particular, I think, I would have had a hard time, I think, coming out of prep and trying to maintain some normalcy in life and eating and my relationship with food anyway. But the fact that I came out of prep straight into COVID, gyms closed, it made it a lot more difficult for me than I think it would have been had COVID not happened. So post COVID, coming out of prep and going through COVID, I struggled definitely more than I had in a very, very long time, in many, many years, probably since I was a teenager. It was the most I struggled coming out of prep and going into COVID. Mentally, physically, it was just, I fell back into my eating disorder a little bit. Nothing too terrible. And then I kind of have struggled with my eating habits and my anorexia and bulimia since COVID. So for the past 2 years. With that being said, in the last few months, I significantly relapsed fully back into my eating disorder. And where I'm at currently, and this may surprise some people, but currently I am very sick. I weigh 84 pounds. I had a heart attack just about a month ago or so, a little over a month ago, due to my low weight and critically low potassium levels. So some pretty significant electrolyte imbalances that caused some heart issues. And low potassium is known for that. It can cause fatal arrhythmias. Thankfully, I am obviously not dead. So I'm very thankful for that. But yeah, so I just I wanted, and everything that I've gone through trying to get treatment since asking for help with my eating disorder, probably about 6 weeks ago, 6 to 8 weeks ago, I asked for help. That's kind of why I wanted to come on here and raise some awareness, because I was really shocked by the lack. I know has always been a lack of resources, but not only a lack of resources, almost a lack of care. Long story short, my insurance is refusing to pay for inpatient care. So I cannot get inpatient treatment. I need to just continue on my own with outpatient treatment, which they will cover. There are very few inpatient units anyway, but the one that I was looking into, that my insurance keeps denying, said the only other way that I would be able to come and get treatment with them would be if I did a self-pay option. And self-pay, I would have to pay $2,500 a day to be there. I don't know anybody who can afford that. So, it's been a bit frustrating to be dealing with insurance companies and treatment facilities nonstop and just being told, no, 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 no. I know you're asking for help. You know you need help. We know you need help, but we're not going to help you. And the other statistic I think that Charlie was referring to was that I know a lot of people probably don't know, if you were to be asked the question, what mental health illness has the highest mortality rate? I think most people would probably say depression, something along that lines. Eating disorders are actually have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness, due to not only death from the disease itself and your body just shutting down, but also suicide-related deaths, because of the eating disorder. So that's usually a pretty surprising fact that most people don't know.
So there's a lot to unload there. I am a little bit less shocked than Justin, just because Shannon, you and I talked previous to this episode briefly, and you kind of unloaded all of it on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot to digest. So the first thing I want to ask is, and I'm sure Justin, you're kind of probably taking a minute to gather your thoughts as well, because I'm sure that you have, a myriad of questions also. What, when you or an individual goes into a relapse,
Mm-hmm.
I know that you can't tell from other people's perspective or speak for other people because there's specific context for that individual. But for you, where does a relapse stem from? Because it's difficult for people to not understand some mental health issues that have never had them. So people that haven't gone through clinical depression or clinical anxiety or things that are actually diagnosable and treated at a clinical level, people don't understand how that comes about, especially because when you look at it at surface value, you look at someone who's in a good mood, so to speak, or they seem like their life is going well, and they suffer from depression, and people will point the finger at that and say, well, I don't understand why that person has depression. They have everything you can want, but it's something that can arise and you can relapse very quickly with very few triggers. So like for you and your specific eating disorders, what caused you to fall back? I know you mentioned COVID and being in bodybuilding prep. Is it like a self-imagery thing where you're liking the way that you look because you're dieting and get ready for a competition, and then suddenly that's removed from you and now you start to put weight back on? Like is it a self-conscientious or self-conscious thing? What caused
Very
you?
much so.
Okay. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
very much so. So for me, watching all the shreds and everything go away, and even just seeing the scale go up and gaining weight and just feeling like enormous, like I just felt so huge and so disgusting. And so personally for me, anybody with with a severe eating disorder does suffer from body dysmorphia. And I think
Oh, for
probably
sure.
the majority of people do, especially people in bodybuilding, to some extent. My body dysmorphia is beyond severe. Even right now at 84 pounds, I look at myself and I find myself multiple times a day when I look at myself telling myself that I'm a fat, disgusting whale. So my body dysmorphia is definitely significantly worse than most people. But yeah, for me, for the most part, it stems from feeling like I'm not muscular enough, like I'm not skinny enough, like I'm not lean enough. And the funny part is it's not even so. And then it's like, I get it in my head. Like if I'm not skinny enough, if I'm not lean enough, if I don't look good enough, like then I'm unlovable. And what's funny to me is that I don't care what other people think of me. But it's what I think. And so then I just keep getting in my own head about it.
Well, and that's where a lot of it stems from is when you look at and think you truly don't care what other people think. And certainly a lot of people with mental health issues and even people that don't have them are in kind of in the same boat where they only care what they think, which is exactly why, the discussing and the talking points, regardless of what people tell you, doesn't help at all. So like, I know if I don't like the way I look, now granted, I'm going to preface what I'm going to say by telling you that clearly I do not have as severe body dysmorphic viewpoints as you do, Shannon, but like everybody, I think to a degree is a little bit self-aware or self-conscious of how they look, especially if you're a competitor. But if I feel like I don't like a certain way that I look, or I feel like I'm not strong or I don't look strong enough or lean enough or whatever it is that I envision in my head, it doesn't matter how many people tell me I look fine, it would not resonate and it won't affect me because I don't care what you think about how I look. I care about how I think how I look. So I
Exactly. Or
completely
you don't
agree with
believe
that.
what they say. You don't believe what they're telling you is true. You think that they're just telling you that. Like, oh,
Yeah.
they're just saying that to like make me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
you
so
just kind of blow it off.
absolutely. And I think that it's almost impossible for you to kind of like gain any confidence or any trust in what people say, no matter how many people will tell you, like, oh, you're fine, you're fine.
Right.
So I think that the first place that I'd like to start with, because certainly that's the whole point of this, is touching on the lack of resources and the lack of awareness of eating disorders in terms of like that mental health umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
Because I will first admit that I am absolutely guilty of that because I'm consider myself, here's the ironic part, is I consider myself a pretty big mental health advocate, and I never bring eating disorders to the table, no pun intended. I never bring that up. It's just something that I even never think of because I just feel like it's, even though it's clearly, when you talk about it, it's like, oh yeah, that's clearly a subdivision of that. It's something that for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just not talked about in the media enough or whatever, but for whatever reason, it's just not something that people readily think about. So I think that having this episode to talk about that being definitely a part of it is huge in and of itself. And now, Justin, I'm sure that you kind of want to chime in here because I know that all of this information is new to you. So like I said, I want to give you a minute to process all of it because when Shannon first told me that she had relapsed and then, having the heart attack and being 84 pounds and stuff, I was almost speechless, which rarely happens. So Justin, you want to like kind of interject here and ask questions
Yeah.
and kind of mentally unload yourself?
Yeah. So, I mean, I knew there was some stuff. I did not know all of it. And first and foremost, Shannon, I'm so sorry. You know, uh, that's a terrible thing that has happened, and I'm very grateful and very glad that you're still here. Um, the only real question I have right now, like the big question, is how can I help? How can I help you? How can I help bring awareness? What can we do?
I think that's the hard part. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that anybody can do for me to help specifically. I truly appreciate the support. And when people reach out to me just to like check in, ask how I'm doing, that kind of stuff. Thankfully, my family is incredibly supportive as well. So, just the support is something really nice to have, knowing that there are people there who want the best for you, who are willing to help you in any way they can. Raising awareness, it's just so eating disorders, it's not even just, even the medical field doesn't know that much about eating disorders unless they specialize in it. So, unless they're a specialty eating disorder unit or a counselor who specializes in that, it's really a totally separate mental health division than like your typical mental health. Like, it's not something you can go to just a standard like mental health, behavioral health unit and get treatment for. It's totally specialized, it's totally separate. And the medical field, doctors don't even know that much about it. So when I like go to the ER and I get admitted, there are a lot of times I get passed from person to person to person because nobody really knows what to do with me. Or they kind of like blow you off because you say you have an eating disorder, and they blow you off because they don't really know how to deal with that, because they know that they can't deal with the eating disorder itself. So they kind of like blow you off. So it's just
Right.
a very like frustrating process, and a position to be in as the person going through it. Now, I know everybody's insurance is different. Mine, for whatever reason, will not pay for inpatient treatment, which is very unfortunate. because I clearly need it. If people, again, most people probably don't know how they categorize eating disorders. So in the general world, like, yes, people talk about BMI, but for the most part, it really doesn't matter that much. It's not like the BMI is not the biggest factor in things, but eating disorders are characterized as mild, moderate, severe, and extreme based on your BMI. Extreme is very rare. It is very rare that someone is diagnosed with an eating disorder that falls in the extreme category because your BMI needs to be under 15. So
I got a question there.
If people don't know, a general BMI, underweight BMI is considered anything under 17.5. So an extreme eating disorder, to be characterized under having an extreme eating disorder, your BMI needs to be under 15. Now that's a super low BMI. So that's why it's so rare. I happen to fall into that category. My current BMI is about 14. And so even some of the inpatient, now this is always interesting to me too, but even some of the inpatient eating disorder units, because my BMI is so low, they say that I am too sick and they wouldn't accept me as an inpatient anyway. So
the system is broken.
The system is very broken. It's an insurance. Like I said, insurance is telling me, yes, we understand you need help. We won't cover it. It's kind of like a slap in the face, because like, what am I paying for then? I'm being forced to have insurance without having a penalty, because if you don't have insurance, you get a penalty on your taxes or whatever. So you're forcing me to have it. I'm paying for it every month. I almost never use it. And you're basically telling me that it's okay if I die. My life doesn't matter. We're not going to cover this. Well, why do I have it?
Yeah, certainly.
Right.
And what I wonder too,
I agree.
And I know this is probably being asked rhetorically, Shannon, because you don't know, but like, it makes me wonder if you don't qualify based on your insurance coverage for inpatient care, who does?
Right.
And how can you also mentioned being too severe, like that seems almost like a paradox. Like, how could somebody be too severe to enter treatment?
Exactly. Like, how can
Because you would think
like
that those are the people that they want.
Yeah.
Right. I think some of the facilities are just not equipped to handle the major medical issues that come along with having an extreme eating disorder. I think that's probably part of what it is. Because there are significant cardiac issues, kidney and liver function issues. So my kidneys and my livers have started failing. Obviously, my heart is not doing too well. When I start to have these episodes where I get very, very ill and need to go to the emergency room, I need oxygen because I can't keep my oxygen up on my own. It dips into the 80s constantly. I get very short of breath, dizzy. I look like death. I look like I'm gray. So I think that's part of it. I think they're not equipped to deal with the severe medical issues that come along with being as sick as I am.
So let's talk about networking then, because obviously you're not getting any help from the insurance company. Mm-hmm. The outpatient type of therapies, or whatever their remedies are, their proposed remedies are, the therapies that goes into it, I feel like that's kind of a moot point, because, and this is just me not knowing much about eating disorders and just thinking, at surface value, it just seems like those would be largely ineffective, because if those strategies were helpful, like those self-help strategies to be able to handle it on your own outside of inpatient care, you wouldn't be in the position you were in. Like
Right.
the length of suffering wouldn't have occurred to be over years and years and years. So you've had success in the past going to these inpatient clinics and having relapsed. You would think that that would first and foremost be the number one place that would be the best for you. So if that's out of the question, or your insurance company dictates that it's out of the question, then what begs the question in my mind would be something along the lines of, what other resources are out there for you? Like, do you find any like self-help groups that you're a part of? Or I'm sure you probably have like a network that you've expanded of people that have eating disorders as well. What type of resources are out there for someone who gets denied this type of care then?
Well, so there are a lot of like eating disorder forums and things like that, which some can be helpful. You have to be careful though, because again, everybody in there is somebody with an eating disorder. So sometimes things get off topic and people start talking about eating disorder behaviors and what they're doing to lose weight. So I don't always think that's the best route for in this case. There are more intense outpatient treatments. So aside from like just going to counseling, there are like they're called like usually like intense outpatient programs. And you go usually every day, every day, all day. And it's just a more intense therapy. However, for me personally, we don't have anything like that in my area that's like really intensive like that. So that's not really an option for me. That might be an option for some people. And I think if you can't get inpatient treatment, then that is 1000% your best option. I do go to an outpatient program now. I do go 5 to 7 days a week typically. And it's for a decent amount of time. So it's definitely, what I'm doing now is definitely more than just like going to see the counselor and like talking for an hour. It's definitely more in depth, and I'm getting more treatment than I was previously. And I'm just for me, I'm just doing whatever treatment is available to me that I have access to. And unfortunately, it's not a lot. And it's not a lot in a lot of areas, other than maybe like bigger cities and stuff. You might have a few more options, but it takes a lot of extensive research to even find resources dealing with eating disorders and different programs, and whether the program is even good or not. So it's really just doing a lot of research, honestly, and calling places and talking to people and seeing what works best for you.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you this. Why do you think, with the prevalency and the death rate being as high as it is, compared to other mental health issues, why do you think this is something that is kind of like, I don't want to say swept under the rug, but isn't as widespread in terms of public knowledge? Because like I said, anytime you bring up you bring up like a mental health issues, me and everybody else that I know, we always talk about like depression, anxiety, like different stems of like obsessive compulsive disorder and certain things like that. But this never gets brought up. So why do you think that it is that, despite being so prevalent, it's something that doesn't get talked about as much?
I think it's because it's so specialized. Because while it is a mental health issue and problem, it's so specialized. It's so much different than your typical mental health that it requires completely different treatment and everything. I think it's just because it's so specialized. It's its own separate mental health thing that I think people almost like forget about it. Or they just don't understand it as well as we do other mental health issues.
And I think that that's probably a really fair point, because just me thinking out loud, like when I think of, my experiences and the experiences of others, there seems to be a pretty definitive and noticeable overlap with some of the other mental health disorders. aside from eating disorder. So when you talk about like depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, a lot of those tend to have overlap, and there's like some gray area where you can't really tell, is this depression or is this anxiety, because it seems like both. And a lot of times people who have one also have some kind of symptoms of the other. Whereas eating disorder is like a completely different animal, and it seems like anorexia and bulimia are not overlapped with the others. Now they can cause some of the others, I'm sure, like some of the anxiety and some of the depression, but it doesn't happen the other way around. I don't see a lot of, and I'm sure it does in some instances, but not a lot of people who have anxiety are going to just automatically develop an eating disorder. I think they're much more readily likely or inclined to develop like depression or obsessive compulsive disorder versus the others.
And most of those mental health illnesses, if you were going into an inpatient or an outpatient treatment for it, everybody, whether it's schizophrenia, anxiety, depression, bipolar, what have you, they can all go to the same facility and get the same or similar treatment, and it will work for all of them. That's not the case for eating disorders. I couldn't go to a behavioral health unit as an inpatient because there's nothing they can do for me, because my treatment would be so much different. I need something 100% different than what every other person there needs and is going to work or help with their mental illness. It's just such a specialized thing.
Yeah. Well,
the pharmaceuticals.
I'm sorry, Justin. We have to go to a quick commercial break. So if you wouldn't mind, Justin, just hold that thought real quick, because we're running out of time here. So we're going to go to a quick commercial break, and we'll talk more with Shannon when we come back. As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram, and order your delicious baked goods today, because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well. And we're back from our commercial break. All right, guys, I apologize to our listeners and to you, Justin and Shannon, for a little bit of an abrupt ending. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's because my account has expired through Zoom, but Zoom, you can upgrade to like a professional account or whatever, and we're doing this interview via Zoom, and it only lets me record for 40 minutes. So when I started the meeting, we had a 40-minute window to where we had to bring you guys on and start the recording process, and we were running out of time, so I didn't want to get to the point where the call was cut off. So without further ado, let's bring back Shannon. And Justin, would you mind just picking up where I kind of rudely interrupted you there?
It's all good. Yeah, absolutely. So what I was going to ask and what I was going to say is, just to touch on what you were saying, Shannon, how all the other mental health issues are treatable at the same facility, like, bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. Yeah. They're all grouped together and can be treated in the same unit, hospital, inpatient, outpatient facility, with a combination of medication and theory and techniques. But as you were touching on, as far as I know, pharmaceutical companies haven't developed a method to treat eating disorders, whether it be anorexia or bulimia or even overeating. They don't have there's not a pill. There's not really a pill that works that can make it happen.
Nope, there's no medication to treat eating disorders like there is for pretty much every other mental health illness out there. There's literally nothing for eating disorders.
Now, Shannon, could you paint a little bit of a picture? Because again, likewise with some of the other topics, it was something that you and I talked about off air for a little bit. Would you mind painting a picture of what your relapse looked like? Because you talked to me about going to the gym and essentially starving yourself, trying to like counteract it. So you're trying to outwork and undereat your way to a physique or for a look that seems pleasing to you, despite being obviously severely at risk. So, what did your day to day look like in the course of the relapse there?
Oh, so my day to day, I mean, eating wise, yes, I was um, under eating or not eating at all. And then I'd sometimes binge and then I'd purge. Or sometimes I would purge even just eating a normal meal because I felt guilty just for eating. Um, and so just kind of back and forth cycle. And I mean, I've always gone to the gym every single day. I've always trained for lengthier training sessions, and I've always trained very hard, intensely. It's what I enjoy. I like HIIT training and that kind of stuff. But I was going to the gym for, on average, 5 to 7 hours a day. A light day for me would have been 4 hours, and that would have been a very light day. Actually, probably I was at the gym for a good 6 to 7 hours a day. I was doing anywhere between, a light day of cardio for me was about 3 hours, and a heavy. My cardio would usually range anywhere from 3 hours to up to 4.5 to 5 hours of just cardio alone. And then I also trained core, and I would lift for 2 hours as well.
I hope that our
Um,
listeners have proper context and experience in the gym, just so they can understand how insane and
yeah.
overwhelming all of that is. Like it actually, if I didn't know you, Shannon, on a personal level, it almost sounds like that's being made up. Just the
Yeah.
fact that your body was physically capable of being that nutrient deprived and put it in. Sorry, I have jumbled thoughts here, but I think that this is a testament, really, if nothing else, to why impatient is so important for someone in your instance, because
Mm-hmm.
outpatient, I'm assuming, requires a lot of discipline and fortitude
Mm-hmm.
to be able to like auto regulate it on your own without
Yep.
like intense supervision. And I think that that right there shows that you not being able to function independently outside of like for like an outpatient therapy or technique is obviously not a question of willpower, because the fact that you can do that insane amount of cardio and strength training on top of being completely nutrient deprived, and then I'm sure sleep deprived, because sleep
Yep.
deprivation is going to occur the in the absence of certain essential nutrients. So like the
Yes,
fact
I
that
have
you probably weren't
terrible.
sleeping is just
I have,
crazy.
I have terrible insomnia. I'm usually cannot sleep for more than 2 hours at a time max.
Hmm.
Um, and I was also working night shift during part of this as well. So, and when I say, I think sometimes too, and I want to clarify, yes, 3 hours of cardio, just any type of cardio, whatever, 3 to 5 hours of cardio is just way over the top, out of control, insane to begin with. But when I say, for me, cardio, like I said, I like HIIT. I like to do that. So my cardio, it wasn't just like 3 hours of like walking. I was doing sometimes 160 sprints a day, an hour of intervals up to level 20 on the stair climber, spin classes, boot camp. So it was intense cardio. It wasn't just like walking. And I honestly, you know, I don't know how my body lasted doing that as long as it did. But what I will say is when it started to shut down, it shut down. And I
Yep.
like couldn't walk some days. I'm so weak. Like even now, I'm better now. I feel better than I did. I mean, I still have days. I had an issue last night again and again earlier today where I got very sick, and had some issues. But when my body shut down, it completely shut down.
It's
Um,
almost
it's,
like
it's,
a
it's,
case of like rhabdo, I would think.
yeah, it's weird going from being an athlete, um, training hard, being strong, physically fit, having an intense amount of endurance to getting short of breath and feeling like you can't breathe just standing up from the couch. Like that's how sick I am. And like I said, I am a little better now while I'm still obviously 84 pounds and, I'm still very sick. I just do what I can every day. I go for walks now a lot. Sometimes I will still go to the gym. I don't do anything crazy like I used to. It's just a totally different way. And you know what? That's hard for me. Sometimes it's harder for me to go to the gym because I want to do the things that I was doing and I can't.
Hmm. That's awful.
But it's weird. It's like, and it's a weird to actually feel your body shutting down and dying. It's a very surreal feeling. And like I said, thankfully, my parents are amazingly supportive, and they help me more than I could ever ask, not just me, but help me take care of my kids. And you guys know, I am very open about my previous struggles, my current struggles, obviously. So I know some people have asked me, well, what are you telling your kids? Um, so I'm very open. We're very open with my kids. They are at ages, my oldest is 14. So she understands completely. My youngest is almost 9. And so while she doesn't understand everything, she understands a lot of it. So I don't go into like super detail with my youngest, especially. I will my oldest if she asks. But they are aware of what's going on. Um, my parents and I are all very open with them about me being sick and what I'm struggling with, which I think is a great thing. But as a mother, like initially, that was very hard, because my kids are watching their mother die right before their eyes. And my youngest actually came up to me. Well, she didn't come up to me. She was too scared to ask me. She went to my dad and she asked if mommy's going to die. And so that's really when we opened up significantly more with them. And they seem so much less anxious now, than they did before. And they talk about it if something's bothering them or if they want to know something. And I just think that's really important to have that open dialogue with your family, especially when you are seeking help. And, it was a hard thing to talk about, with my kids, to sit down and say, yes, I might die, because I don't want to lie to them. But it's very emotional to sit down and say, yes, I might die, but this is what we're working on so that I don't.
Hmm. I can't even, it's difficult for me to really wrap my brain around any of it, obviously, because I've never gone through it. And one of the things that kind of frustrates me about about mental health awareness in general is how everybody can assume what you're going through. And while people are just trying to be helpful, to say that they understand and stuff is obviously a fallacy. So like I don't even want to begin to try to like put myself in your shoes and wonder what that would be like, because I have absolutely no experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
But so like now I think, where do you go from here? So you've obviously, because there's different steps of like recovery. Like they say, the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. Okay, clearly
Yep.
that identification is there. Like you've tried to get help in an outpatient, or excuse me, an inpatient facility that obviously is not affordable at the moment, which is a travesty and a whole nother talking point in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you go from here now? Like what is your thought process as far as like getting help at the next level?
from here. I'm still occasionally doing research on potential inpatient treatment facilities or different options that I have that insurance would cover. Um, but for right now, I am sticking with doing the outpatient therapy. Um, I have definitely made progress from where I was a month ago. While it's very slow progress, it's still progress. And it's like trying to change little things each day and, working with all of my therapists on treatment, working with my family here on treatment when I'm home. And it's the fact that I can't get inpatient treatment kind of gave me two options. Either I say, well, I give up and I'm just going to stay in my eating disorder and I'm going to die. Or I'm going to need to really focus hard and work harder than I've ever worked before to get back to recovery and get back to a healthy point. And it's not going to be easy and it's going to be a long road, but I need to take the accountability myself. And I just need to put the extra work in, and I really need to just do everything I can from my standpoint on an outpatient basis to get healthier.
And I want to kind of too piggyback off of what Justin said earlier, because not just with Justin and I specifically, but with anybody who would consider themselves a caregiver or a family member or a friend of someone who's going through any type of eating disorder, regardless of severity, what, in your opinion or your estimation, is helpful from other people? So, like, what do you want from your daughters during this time? What do you want from your family? What do you want from even your friends like Justin and I? Because I know that everybody has like kind of a different opinion on how they should be handled during certain situations, like even something completely minor, like when I get in a bad mood. Like I'm one of
Right.
those people who I don't like talking about it. I don't want to be someone who talks it out and, gets it off their chest or has any type of heart to heart with anybody. I just want to be left alone and be as short as people and have as minimal human interaction as possible. So there
Mm-hmm.
may be some like individual nuance here, but like just things that are specific to you. But like, so the reason I brought that up is because I thought about what Justin said earlier when he said, like, how do we help? How can we
Mm-hmm.
help either with you specifically or raising awareness, or where do you think other people can go from here? You know what your next steps are, but what do our next steps need to be?
So for
Yeah,
me, like honestly, just having people just be there to support me, even if they just like check in and just say, hey, I just wanted you to know I was thinking of you. Or hey, how are you feeling? Like, how are things going? Anything like that. For me, like for like my friends and my family who are here and like very close to me and like I see all the time and my daughters, it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes, but for me personally, like I need to be called on my shit. If you see me doing something or behaving a certain way or engaging in eating disorder activities, um, I need to be called on it because sometimes I don't even know I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
I totally
so I need to
completely
like
agree.
I need them to be like, no, you can't do that, or I saw you doing this. Like, and you could like so obviously my parents in particular have dealt with this with me since I was a teenager. So they're very good about going about it in a great way that's helpful for me without like feeling like I'm being attacked or judged or anything like that. But for me personally, I like to be called on my bullshit and I know I need to be. Um, because then I'm like, and like I said, sometimes I don't realize that I'm even doing it. So that's helpful for me too. Um, just having people be there that if I need somebody to talk to or reach out to is a great thing too. It takes a lot of support, and it's a very long, grueling physical and mental process to recover from an eating disorder. It's no joke. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And I think positive reinforcement is always a great thing too, even the smallest thing. So like I was having a really hard day, like mentally one day, and I was putting the kids to bed. And my oldest daughter, when I said goodnight to her, she said, good job today getting through a tough day, Mom. I'm really proud of you. And that just was the best feeling in the world to hear from her. So
Kids don't realize how impactful they are, do they?
They don't. It's just the little things that like it made such a big difference. It meant the world to me for her to say that she was proud of me, and that, and it's amazing when my parents say that they're proud of me and that they can see the tiny progress that I'm making, even though it's not much. It's still a step in the right direction, and trying to focus on the small positives each day rather than the negatives.
Right.
Because you pretty much live in your head with negative thoughts and self-hate, and
that's a whole battle in itself.
it is.
I know what you mean on that 100%. I deal with that on a daily.
Yeah, it's a daily battle. And I think like what some people don't like, if people don't deal with that, they don't realize what a battle it is. It's literally like trying to fight these screaming voices in your head all day long, like telling you how you're not good enough, how nobody loves you, how you don't look good enough, you're not a good enough mom, a dad, like whatever. And it's overwhelming, and it's so exhausting, both physically and mentally.
Now, one question I want to ask as well, too, because this pops in my head after hearing you talk about how we should conduct ourselves, so to speak. It's got to be, I guess it's not really a question more so than just like a statement. It's got to be very difficult for people who are in your life too to like blend the effusive positivity and constantly being positive with you and picking you up and encouraging you, but then also, like you said, calling you out when you do something wrong, because I feel like for a lot of people that's a very, very fine line to walk, where you want to be super positive with someone, but at the same time there needs to be that high degree of accountability. And Justin, I know you firsthand have been pretty adamant about that in the past, about how you are someone who needs people to call you out for certain things, and you kind of, in a sense, like it. Not that anybody likes being called out, but I just remember you, Justin, saying that you're one of those people who welcomes like the constructive criticism with certain things.
Yeah, I do. Honestly, that's something that, I said all the time. And that's why when you said, call me on my shit, I've literally said that to every person in my family, in my life, because I will relapse. I have relapsed. And unless somebody helps, it can get dark and twisty real fast.
Yes,
and, that's why when months ago when me and you were talking, you're the only person I opened up to about it, to be honest, because, somebody else that understands.
Yeah. And there's not a whole lot of people who like truly understand on that level a lot of times. So it's nice when you can connect with someone who does understand. And that's why, like, I know I said it on our last 2 podcasts that we did, and I will say it again. I, just like Justin said, anybody can feel free to reach out to me at any time, whether it's to ask me a question about me personally in my experience. I am open about it. So feel free to do that. Whether you need support, anything, please reach out to me. The worst thing you can do is try and hide it and not ask for help and not ask for support. I did that and it almost killed me. Please, please, please.
Yeah.
Please reach out for help, whether it's to me, to Justin, to Charlie, to your family, to whoever. Please reach out for help.
And I'm glad that you and Justin kind of have that that type of relationship where there's relatability there, because I feel like me personally, that's kind of the opposite of the role that I'm in, where like I don't know and I can't relate. And it really also sucks for someone in my position because you want to be able to help, but since I don't have the relatability factor, that I've never gone through it, it's very difficult for me to give any insight. And a lot of times too, it's difficult to even receive insight from people that haven't gone through it. Like if I have someone that's coaching me in football that has never played football, it's very difficult for me to take a lot of stake in what they say, because there's not like the in the trenches experience. So it's nice when you're able to connect and network with people that have the in the trenches experience, that know exactly what they're going through or what you're going through because they lived it themselves, versus someone who's telling you like the coach speak or the cliche, like, oh, well, we can be positive about this and you'll overcome it. But it's very easy for someone to say that if they've never gone through it, versus someone who actually has the life experience, so to speak, of having gone down that road. It's a lot easier for them to connect with you.
Or you see, I don't know if you see, but I see fairly frequently the bodybuilders, anybody in the bodybuilding world that, not that they're necessarily saying they have an eating disorder, but they're like kind of trying to relate to you like they did. And I'm like, no, you just had like an unhealthy relationship with food for a month or two coming out of a show. It's very different.
Or like when you talk about the self imagery, like a lot, it's very easy for like somebody in the bodybuilding community where their physique is important to them, clearly, to say, oh yeah, I have self image issues, like I don't like the way I look.
Right.
But there's a completely different animal that we're talking about with like the clinic, from the clinical side of things, when it's someone like yourself who is literally dying, having to suffer through this wretched disease. So I think that you do appreciate, I think, I'm sure that, like, at least I know I appreciate people that try to put themselves in my shoes and try to relate, but it's also hard because it's just not even remotely in the same ballpark.
Right.
So one of the things that we did, Shannon, was I posted a Q&A asking for questions, and I got a bunch of questions, but I think for the sake of time, this is like a wonderful time for us to kind of wrap up the episode. So what I'd like to do, as long as you're cool with it, and I'm sure Justin, I'm certain, is as well, we'd like to bring you back on. Number one, because I got a lot of good questions. I had like 2 or 3 really, really good ones that I for sure want to ask. I know that Justin and myself both had personal questions that we wanted to ask. And now having access to all this new information about where you're at currently in your life, I feel like I can post that again and we're going to get a completely different flow of questions, because a lot of the questions that I got previously were about some of the previous episodes, like how you manage all of the things that you do. And now you're in a completely different mentality. You're in a completely different professional space. Like your life is totally different from where it was a couple years ago during our initial interview. So now that we're, like I said, now that we're privy to all this new information, I'm sure that the questions are going to be like largely different. So I don't even want to begin to delve into those, because I'd like to kind of reopen the floor, so to speak, to social media and be like, hey guys, now that you know all this, and she's opened up this huge can of worms, now what are some of the questions you guys have? And I'm hoping, not that I want to hear about people suffering from issues, because that's obviously not what we hope for, but I'm hoping that there are people out there who are suffering that will now reach out to either you or to us, having heard this conversation, because that's the main reason why you wanted to come on, is to spread awareness, not just so people talk about it, but spread awareness so that people can reach out to you and help. So where can people get in contact with you if they hear this episode and want to touch base with you?
The easiest place to touch base with me is probably right through Instagram. SKnorr13 is my Instagram handle. feel free to just send me a message anytime.
And I know that Shannon this is not just her speaking in cliches when she says this. I know that firsthand that she is someone who will be there for anybody. The proverbial give you the shirt off her back saying it resonates and holds true with her. So I can say that from experience. So Justin, is there anything else that you want to like touch on or maybe give some closing comments? I know that you and I are both kind of in the same boat. We're a little bit in awe and in shock, and there's a lot to process with what her life has dealt her lately, and how you and I can be good resources for her and all that stuff. So do you have any closing comments you'd like to add?
So I guess with all that being said, and the weight of the topic at hand, right, I think my only closing comment really is don't be afraid to reach out to somebody for help. And then likewise, if somebody reaches out to you, you put on that, that thick skin and be that person for them. It doesn't take a lot to give somebody the help they need.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with that. So Shannon, I'd like to thank you as always for coming on. I'm sure as soon as this episode airs, the three of us will be in touch trying to schedule you in for yet another, as long as you're willing.
Of course.
Because I think that you are like a super valuable person who has a lot of good to bring in this world. And I know that people love the first couple episodes with you, and I'm sure that they'll love the rest of the episodes that we have, graciously been provided with your time for. So we appreciate it. And I know that our listeners do as well. Yes. So with that, we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. As always, we appreciate your listenership on this episode 148, and we look forward to hearing back from you guys next week. Unbreakable, unstoppable.